Spirit of God, open our minds to your word, spoken for us. In hearing you, the veil may be lifted, and we will be free. Amen. So I think it's kind of a tricky thing to try and sum up what Jesus' mission in this world was. I mean, there were so many things that he taught, so many things that he said, so many things that he did, and these complicated things that people have pondered over for thousands of years. Theologians and mystics and biblical scholars, clergy, even Hollywood, from time to time, likes to put its little spin and interpretation on what Jesus taught. And it's probably even tricky to try and sum up what the Holy Spirit has been doing in God's church throughout all of human history. But having studied and prayed on and reflected and thought on and preached on the Gospels for quite a few years now, I would say arguably that what Jesus was trying to do in all of his ministry and all of his teachings and all the things that he did was to simply heal. Heal how we see. To heal how we see God, how we see one another, and to heal how we see ourselves. He was trying to open our eyes to the truth. And I think that's really what the Spirit of God continues to try to do with all of us even to this day. To see as much as we can as God sees. Last week in the Gospel, Jesus spoke about setting our mind on divine things and not human. In the Gospel today, the disciples just cannot see. Jesus is talking about his own death for the second time, and not too distant a span. Tells them he's going to be betrayed and killed. And what are they concerned with? Not his well-being. Who's Jesus' best friend? Who's the greatest? Who's the best disciple of all of them? And the words the Gospel uses to describe how they were talking about this is that they were arguing. They were arguing with one another who was the greatest. So what Jesus is trying to do in the Gospel is to tell them and redefine and open their eyes to what is true greatness. Because here's the thing. We all want it. I don't care who you are sitting in this church today. In some way, myself included, we all want greatness. We all want to be known, to be distinguished in some way. We all want to be recognized and lifted up. Be it among our friends, our peers, in our job, we all to some degree want to be special and important. Acknowledged for being good. And in a sense, that's okay, because we are. 41 years ago, this past Friday, Fred Rogers, we all know who Fred Rogers is, began taping his first episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And his great gift and ministry to the world for 33 years was to tell children, and sometimes we adults, that we are important, that we are valuable and good for no other reason than simply because of who we are in our uniqueness. And that is true. Jesus, throughout his ministry, lifted people up and lifted them into dignity, no matter who they were, no matter how unwanted or unwelcome they were. What Jesus is trying to teach is that our goodness and our value is not how high above others we may like to pretend we are, or that we may seem to go in our careers, in our salaries, in our homes, in our fame, etc., but that true greatness in the eyes of God is about how we serve other people and how we see them. How we sacrifice. Memory, I believe, is often the great holder of truth. We have all these memories of insignificant events that happen in our everyday lives, these passing moments that happen day to day, and they often fade into history. But what remains after all of those insignificant memories disappear is often what defines us. I want you all to think. of a person. I want you to remember a person or two in your own life who are true examples of what it is to be good, to be a blessing, to be beautiful, to be great. The people that for you are the most powerful figures in your life. It could be right now or 30 years ago. Think about that person. I'm going to imagine that person was probably not a person of great fame, or great skill, or great money, or notoriety. It was probably someone who served you, someone who sacrificed for you, someone who gave of themselves for you, someone who put what you needed first before what they wanted. And at its heart, that is what service is. You see, what is truly good and powerful, what lasts, what makes a difference in this life is serving other people. And Christ, as Christ always does, puts it very bluntly in the gospel. You have to be last. You have to serve all people. I don't know if we do so well with the concept of last. Last in this world that we live in is not something that you strive for. Last is bad. Last equals losing, failure, embarrassment. Don't get me wrong, it's not like this is something that is unique to us. This has always been, even 2,000 years ago in the time of Jesus. Greatness, being first, was something you strove for. But as usual, Christ turns how this world sees things upside down. He tells us that what the world teaches is not always right. It may feel good, it may seem right, but when we look to be on the top of the mountain, to be the greatest at a thing, to be better than others, what does that do? It turns us into ourselves. We begin to look only at us. What do I need to rise above? We begin to see more and more only me. That's what James is talking about in the second letter. I'm going to paraphrase what James said in the letter. Why do you argue and fight so much? Because all these wants and all these desires, these things that we see and have to have, swirl around in us. And we insist on having them at any cost. And when we can't have them, people get mean. People get spiteful. And why don't you have the things that you think you need? Because you're asking for the wrong things. You're asking for the things of this world and not the things of the Spirit. This past week in our country, very sadly, it has become sort of a routine. We had no less than 3 mass shootings in Pennsylvania, in Maryland, and in Wisconsin. All of them, in some way, came from what James describes in the second letter. Those conflicts and disputes, where do they come from? They come from your cravings at war within you. You want something and you do not have it. See, for each of these individuals, regardless of their individual motives, there was something in them, some need that wasn't met, maybe could not have been met. This deep-seated anger at something or someone that twisted them. And they were unwilling or unable to see anything but themselves and their own pain. And it's not just in these extreme and violent situations that we see what James is talking about. I'm sure we've all seen it at some point or in some person in our life. Why do families split after the death of a parent, when estates are being settled? We've all heard stories about this. Because the want for my share, my money, is put over the need of holding a family together and the need of respecting the person who has passed. Why do some parents fight with their grown kids? I don't mean little bickerings here and there, little light arguments. I mean ongoing conflict and distance. Because often we put our agenda and our wants onto their lives without seeing first what our children need. Why do we feel so restless? Why do we have this searching, always looking for the next thing but never finding peace? Because we're looking for the wrong things. We're looking for things to distract, to satisfy our wants. But here's the good news in the gospel today. Here's the good news that Jesus gives us about all of this. Greatness is not about perfection. It's not about being better than the other teacher, the other parent, the other husband, the other person in your office. We don't have to be the best dad, the perfect mom, the one who has all the right answers. We don't have to know exactly what to say and what to do when our kids have a problem or are afraid or confused. We don't have to have exactly the perfect balance of screen time, study time, play time, quality time, and meal time. What makes us great parents is that we serve our children out of love. That we keep trying. That we keep trying to be better and better at putting their needs before our wants. So you don't have to be the perfect husband. That's good news for me. Or the perfect wife, or the perfect boss, or friend, or nurse, or cop, or teacher, or pastor. What makes us great and first as any one of these is that we are willing to put the person standing in front of us ahead of us. Ahead of that to-do list that's running around in our head that we have to get done. Ahead of our opinions of them. Ahead of how they look. Ahead of how mundane their story may seem. How angry they are, how unkind they may be to us. But to give them what they need in that moment. Even if we have 10 other things that we want to do or would rather be doing. To be something as small as a word of kindness and hello, an ear to listen to what's going on in their life. A great author and mystic and monk of the 20th century named Thomas Merton said it this way: our job is to love others without stopping to inquire whether or not they are worthy. I'm going to transpose that word love with serve. Our mission as disciples is to serve other people without stopping to inquire if they are worthy of being served. Needs and wants. So the question is, what do those people around us need right now? What does your wife need? What does your husband need? Not what do we think they should need, which we can all fall into the habit of doing. What do they need? What does that irritating person at your work, in your class, who lives next door to you need? What do your children need? Give it to them, even when it's not convenient. When logically you have other things to do, or that you want to do. What do the widows and the orphans of this generation need? What do the strangers and the refugees in our country need? What does the unhappy neighbor or co-worker or grumpy spouse or forgotten spouse or searching child need? This is what Jesus is talking about in the gospel today. Whoever wants to be first, whoever wants to be greatest, must be last of all and serve all people. To serve as Jesus calls us, to be first as Jesus defines it, is to put the needs of other people, no matter who they are, before our wants. See, the irony in all of Jesus' teaching today is that true greatness is not being seen, but in becoming lost. Lost in the God who moves you to absolute and unquestioning compassion for all people, especially the weakest and the most needy. So, my sisters and brothers, serve. Serve. Serve as he serves, even now. Because greatness, as Christ defines it, is knowing at the end of the day that the life of another human being is better because you opened your eyes that morning, and then forgetting completely that it ever happened. Amen. Let it be so.